welcome to this special edition of the Riyal Deal Plus, coming to you from the Arabiya English studios. Today we're turning our full attention to Vision 2030. That is a subject we talk about a lot on this programme. Well, launched in 2016 by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Vision 2030 is an ambitious strategic framework which seeks to reduce Saudi Arabia's dependence on oil and diversify the kingdom's economy. Well, as well as focusing on non-oil industries, the vision seeks to foster innovation and develop public service sectors such as health, education, infrastructure and tourism. Well, with clock ticking and the year 2030 approaching, what's been achieved so far? What challenges lie ahead? And how is Vision 2030 reshaping the identity of Saudi Arabia? Well, those are some of the questions I'm going to be putting to my guest today, who is Dr. Aziz Alghashian, who is a senior non-resident fellow at the Gulf International Forum and a specialist on Saudi Arabia's foreign policy. Dr. Alghashian, thank you very much indeed for joining us once again here on Al Arabiya English. Let me start by asking you, what was the original thinking behind Vision 2030? How was the vision born and what was its original goal?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to join you. I think I appreciate very much the opportunity to really rehash why 2030 vision has been kind of pushed and declared and conceived, because I think no matter how many times we talk about it, I think it's worth going back to the origins. So thank you very much for this opportunity. And I would say I think it's to be very direct, it's clear that it's about restructuring not only the Saudi economy, but really restructuring the Saudi state. I think for the past decades, there's been a lot of discussions regarding the sustainability of how the Saudi economy will continue in its form that was very oil-centric or natural resource based. And it was clear that I think it was very unsustainable. And I think with the change of leadership and the change of kind of the dynamics, both and the international dynamics and inside Saudi Arabia politically, there was then a real push and an institutionalization of this kind of change. And I think this is what really conceived, I think 2030. 2030 really is about reconstructing not only the state, not only the economy, but reconstructing the Saudi state. Because I think, without reconstructing or addressing core issues of society, addressing a lot of the tapped sources that have been unused, the tapped manpower and women power that have been unused, restructuring the economy in itself is just a very difficult task. So I think that's really about, in other words, to catapult Saudi Arabia into the 21st century and beyond.
I want to read an excerpt, really for the benefit of our audience, from Vision 2030. It goes as follows. This ambitious roadmap leverages the kingdom's unique strengths, its pivotal role in the Arab and Islamic worlds, its strong investment capabilities and its strategic geographical position. Vision 2030 is a blueprint that is diversifying the economy, empowering citizens, creating a vibrant environment for both local and international investors, and establishing Saudi Arabia as a global leader. Vision 2030 is transforming the socio-economic landscape of the country. It is improving the quality of life for our citizens and residents. Saudi Arabia is forging a future where tradition, innovation and sustainability go hand in hand, providing endless opportunities for citizens to realize their potential and ushering in a new era of development and prosperity for the kingdom. You know very well the vision has three key pillars. One of them is entitled A Vibrant Society. I'd like to ask you, how does Vision 2030 balance these various goals? It's got Saudi heritage and values on the one hand, traditional, quite conservative, and a push for modernization on the other side. How do you reconcile the two?
It's a fantastic question, and it's an important question, and that's a process that's actually continuous. It's still till now. For me, what I would say is that I think striking this balance, and I think the negotiation between managing the traditions and I think the aspect of modernity or the social reform is not something that just started within 2030. I think this was a discussion that was really taking place even before. It's very fascinating how, young the Saudi state is and how big the gaps are between the generations. It really leapfrog a lot of these things. So, I mean, in my parents' generation, there were probably barely cars around. And then all of a sudden, here I am in our generation, being in the kid in the 90s and 2000s, there were worlds apart. They were literally worlds apart. And then you have this generation, Generation Z. So I think this intergeneration discussion has always been there. And I have to say, at times it generates tension. This is no doubt. But also it generates a lot of originality, in my opinion. And I think you start to see this. And I think it really is, it really goes down to, I think, also the aim and the bearings of where the trajectory of where the country is going. I think if there is a new a clear direction of what are I would say what are the opportunities, but also what are the limitations and what is the goals. There will be a great deal of originality of trying to balance between what are the or leverage, I would say, leverage the history and the heritage that we have and generate it into something of fantastic initiatives. And also, I think, opportunities to create more space for not only articulation, not only space to find new space for people within society, but also can this be leveraged into investment? We see, for example, the aspect of camel milk and the products that emanate from that. And this is, I think, for example, a prime example of how leveraging our heritage, leveraging our history, our norms. Of course, our norms are not just camels and stuff from the desert, but leveraging our things that make us into something that is becoming very business focused, creating opportunities. So it's a negotiation that is taking place. Sometimes it creates tension, it creates originality, and it creates opportunities. But I think one of the main benefits of 2030 is that it creates that debate, and that debate in itself is worth having. And since there is this discussion, I think this is really where the moving forward, the momentum forward is seen. I think that's one of the hallmarks of it. It's the creating these discussions.
Yeah, and actually nowhere sort of seems to exemplify this marriage of history and heritage and modernity better, in my mind, than somewhere like Alula, where you've got all of that archaeological richness and heritage richness alongside the Maraya Concert Hall, the largest mirrored building, outdoor building in the whole world. I mean, an amazing juxtaposition there. Under that same heading of a vibrant society, there is the goal to bring about improvements in the quality of life, housing, healthcare, social care, right across the country. And I want to ask you, as a Saudi national, are you seeing these changes happening under your nose? I mean, does this change manifest itself in every aspect of daily life in Saudi Arabia?
Well, where I am, from my vantage point in Riyadh, I think there is clear change. And I think, it's very difficult to go anywhere without seeing, I think, a lot of these initiatives and promises materialize. This is, in our everyday life. I think, recently I had to change my passport, and then rather than go to the department that we all used to go in, now I just go in online and get it from Ibshir, and it's delivered to me within days. I think you could, going to the airport, you can see all these very mammoth mega projects in place. So I think you could see this change. At the same time, I think once they start going outside of Riyadh, outside of Saudi, or at the outskirts of Riyadh, then you start to see that listen, we still have some way to go. We still have some way to go. And I think this is, for me, I think that the main benefit of Vision 2030 is that it's not necessarily about achieving goals immediately on 2030, either before 2030 or after 2030. There have been some goals that kind of the vision strive to achieve, and they reached it before 2030. And there are some that will take a bit more time. The crux of 2030, in my opinion, was to really start a fundamental process moving forward. I think a lot of the times, historically, in Saudi Arabia, there were always these efforts to diversify economy, to move away from oil, to build kind of the private sector. But it never got past stage one or stage two even. I think now there is no way back. And I think that in itself, people could see this. And so I think, definitely the changes is there to remind us, but also the ways to go is there to remind us as well, which is good because it keeps us going.
The next pillar of the Vision 2030 is a thriving economy. And, the first thing I thought of when I look at that heading is I look at a map of the world, and I see Saudi Arabia and where it sits in the world. I mean, it's a really strategic location, and you think to yourself, what a perfect location to be a global trade hub. Do you think using Saudi Arabia's geography to its advantage is really perhaps at the core of a lot of Vision 2030?
No, of course. I think that's where the untapped potential is. I think there were times where Saudi was not open enough, and that's what did not allow it to leverage this this geographic position. And now it is. And I think this has also a lot to do with probably the people that were making the decisions and maybe what was appropriate and what was not appropriate. But I think now, becoming more open, becoming more a hub, of a tourist hub, of a logistics hub. This is indeed a pillar of Saudi because it's leveraging its natural position. And I think also, 2030 it's a mammoth task. So leveraging any points that come to us naturally has to be invested in greatly.
Obviously, the next pillar out of the three pillars is an ambitious nation. That's the heading for it. And we've talked a little bit about government and governance already. And your example of not going to the passport office and renewing your passport online is an interesting example because it raises the question that I wanted to ask you, whether you think perhaps an element of Vision 2030 is about big business, small government. Do you think that's part of it?
No, absolutely. Again, it goes back to something that we alluded to earlier, which is the private sector, and the private sector basically doing the heavy lifting forward. I think it's very fascinating to see this. I remember vividly, not too long ago, that many people would want to have jobs in the government. Because I think of prestigious reasons and also, the government in itself was the biggest employer. And this was just not sustainable. I think now, the private sector is really the machine to help catapult Saudi Arabia forward. And I think trying to unleash this force is in itself, a very... It's a focal point now of the Saudi economy, I would say. And moreover, I think what we are seeing here is not only how I think the private sector works with, I think, the government sector and works with the nation, but you could even see this, for example, in Syria right now, where the private sector in Saudi Arabia is being used to help build Syria, reconstruct Syria. Moreover, you could see it in, for example, trying to help build or work more with Egypt because of their situation. And so the private sector now is not only a machine moving forward, but it has geopolitical resonance. And this is really due to the size of Saudi. I think the role that Saudi plays geopolitically and internationally. So I think the private sector is becoming far more strategic than ever in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned Syria, you mentioned Egypt there, and all of this under the heading of an ambitious nation. So I sort of feel like we're sort of gravitating towards foreign policy. And I'm just wondering to what extent we can see Vision 2030 at work in Saudi foreign policy. I mean, you've given a couple of examples already, but where else might we see it?
No, I think, well, firstly, also whoever I think reads 2030 vision, while it's a nation first initiative, it's about developing Saudi Arabia, but it's not a nation only. It speaks to the region, it speaks to the international dimensions as well, and basically it's opening up its economy. And it's seeking it needs a better relationship with the region, and it needs a better region, a more stable region. So I think that's very clear. That's also what you hear a lot from kind of the foreign policy officials, is that, listen, a lot of these ambitious, very lofty projects that we have, is very difficult to obtain in a regionally turbulent or in a turbulent that's region. So I think. This is where now it becomes a very powerful incentive to try to begin to develop and to not only leverage 2030, but to try to protect 2030. That it is 2030 is, or reconstructing the Saudi economy, it is an existential question for Saudi Arabia, and therefore I think it needs. It needs a far more stable region, and it needs partners to this. What's very interesting here, if I could say something more, kind of more historically, we are now seeing a very economic-driven foreign policy, and I think that's very clear. I argue this is actually the traditional foreign policy of Saudi Arabia. When Saudi, was first, before even Saudi was declared as a kingdom, its foreign ministry was in Jeddah alongside the Minister of Finance. And it was about trying to find, I think, companies to look for oil inside Saudi Arabia, and to bring much needed funds and money for Saudi. So in many ways, I think the business first, the economy driven foreign policy for Saudi is actually a traditional one, but the way but the landscape is just completely different. So I think it's very difficult to try to separate geopolitics from economy, geopolitics from society, and 2030 now is not only something that we could see that could be leveraged, but something that requires protection from the volatility of the region. And another thing as well, I wanted to say this: the region in itself, especially in the GCC, is also going through it has its own fair share of visions as well. I mean, Qatar has a 2030 vision. Oman has a 2040 vision. Abu Dhabi has a 2030 vision. So we are actually entering into an era in the region of visions. We're a kind of a vision heavy place, especially in the GCC. And I think in my discussions with colleagues around Israel and Palestine and around Syria, is that, to what extent can there be, visions that could speak to Saudi's vision also, and vice versa, and allow the heavy lifting, allow the economy to do some of the heavy lifting there. Because unfortunately, we're seeing, in Gaza, a humanitarian crisis that's just getting worse and worse. and every time we're trying to talk about reconstruction, it's difficult. Well, how are we going to reconstruct all of this? How are we going to create a more sustainable region? And I think for me, it's worth discussing having a more interdependence amongst respective visions around the region. So the notion of visions goes back to your first question, is something that I think could be regionalized. And if it does become more regionalized and institutionalized and strengthened, then I think we could probably head to a more stable region.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. I would have loved to have talked to you for longer. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you very much indeed for helping us to better understand Vision 2030. Dr. Aziz Alghashian, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for watching this special edition of the Riyal Deal Plus, only here on Al Arabiya English. Thank you very much again. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Stay tuned.